Hello, and thank you for joining this webinar hosted by Nextime in association with the U.S. India Business Council, USIBC, ICICI Bank Canada, and CBRE. I am Mark Lessam, and joining us today as co-moderator is Jasjeet Singh. Jasjeet is the Senior Director at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and he leads some of the world's leading manufacturing and supply chain companies in navigating subnational and federal government relations. He's an experienced consultant and a proven leader in the US-India corridor. Additionally, he leads USIBC's engagement on Capitol Hill in the United States, where he has developed a broad perspective on incentive structures and industry benefits to operate in different states. Jasjeet, I'm truly honored to share the moderator role with you today. Thank you for joining. I'm the Senior Executive Director with Nextime, and I lead efforts to enhance the presence of Nextime in North America. Like many of you, I'm a business executive with operational experience across multiple functions and industries. I do intend to share our contact information at the end of this session, and I'd welcome meeting with any of you interested in learning more about how Nextime might support you. So we're pleased to present today the third of our four-part series entitled Global Capability Centers, India as the Preferred Destination. I invite you to join us for our last session, which will be on December 8th. In our first and second installments, we covered why India is considered a GCC hub, the key operating models of a GCC, and how organizations can build cyber resilience. Today's topic is on catalyzing transformations and taking advantage of multifunctional GCCs. So before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to welcome our distinguished panel. Deepak Sharma, who's the director at Johnson & Johnson Global Services. Sukanya Roy, who's head of Global Capability Centers and Business Process Management at the National Association of Software and Service Companies, otherwise known as NASSCOM, which is an Indian-based non-governmental trade association and advocacy group. Misha Arafiev, Global Supply Chain Executive, and Alpana Shargankar, Senior Executive Director of the Business Process Management Practice at Nextime. So I will begin this presentation with a brief overview on today's topic. We'll then have an expert panel, which will be followed by audience questions if time permits, and we do aim to conclude in 60 minutes. Before we begin, please note that you are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions, please share them with us through the question box on the control panel. We'll address these questions toward the end of the session or in writing if time doesn't permit us to cover them during our broadcast. Finally, before we begin the third presentation, the third installment, I'll take a moment just to reflect a little bit on a few key points from our previous two broadcasts. First, installment one shed light on India's advantages as a favorable location to set up a GCC. Despite the pandemic, the Indian GCC market accounted for more than 25% of new setups in 2020, and it's estimated to be generating revenues of over $60 billion by the year 2025. In the second installment, we discussed three operating models for GCCs. The first, captives, wherein the organization builds and operates all processes. The second was a build, operate, and transfer model, wherein the organization might engage with a third party to establish and operate the GCC before then transferring it to that organization to carry forward. And finally, the managed services model, where a third party is engaged and then provides governance while the organization operates the center. We also discussed the evolution of global capability centers while covering essential aspects related to cyber resilient operational framework. These recordings of these sessions are available through Nextime's YouTube channel. So let's now talk a little bit about the focus of GCCs in India. Based on NASSCOM's sample survey report, 43% of GCCs are singularly focused, while 57% are integrated. Integrated simply means that an organizations are sourcing a combination of functions, IT, business processes, and/or engineering and R&D from one single cohesive center. In other words, the GCC is multitasking. So let's take a deeper dive into the functions of these centers. IT centers include functions such as application and development and management, cybersecurity services, data center outsourcing, network services, and service desks. Business process management centers might include functions such as finance and accounting, contract management, payroll, human resource management, and procurement. Engineering and R&D centers include design, innovation, product lifecycle management, intellectual property management, among others. And a GCC's journey starts with objectives of cost reduction, centralization, and standardization of processes. However, as they scale up, they gain potential to be multifunctional to serve the strategic goals of the organization. In this graphic, progressing from left to right, first, organizations create a proof of concept by testing the transition and working of a single function GCC. Then they scale up that function. Once the single function is stabilized and successful, organizations plan to set up the remaining functions from the overall pool, such as IT, procurement, etc. With that successfully done, centralization and standardization of processes takes place, which then leads to efficiencies at a global level. Standardization can come in much earlier, depending on the overall strategy and the nature of the process. Finally, the organizations then take the processes to the next step by infusing technology and improving the operations through automation. So I'd like to explore how an organization can leverage a multifunctional GCC setup for its own future growth. Multifunctional GCCs support transformation and automation initiatives. They focus on upskilling their workforce for future requirements. In fact, the next pool of CFOs and CIOs are quite often nurtured within these GCCs. These centers support global leaders in key decision-making. They assist in strategic growth through M&A, adopting new transformation ideas, becoming innovation centers, and then act as a global data bank across multiple functions. Finally, through these centers, global reporting and analysis can be done to make strategic plans, monitor project schedules, and the like. That's it. I promised you a brief presentation, and this concludes that. I'd like to now invite Jasjit to introduce our expert panel and to kick off our panel discussion. Jasjit?
Thanks so much, Mark. It's my pleasure to introduce today's expert panel. Deepak Sharma is Director of Business Process Outsourcing, BPO Partner Governance at Johnson & Johnson. He oversees a portfolio of supplier partnerships with a global footprint and delivery of best-in-class services for the company's procurement, finance, HR, and customer quality functions. These BPO partnerships enable more than 130,000 employees across the world. Mishaf Arifov, in his 27 years of hands-on expertise in building and leading supply chain platforms in Asia and European regions, Misha has managed supply and services for a broad range of products: pharma, medical devices, consumer, vaccines, generics. He's been actively involved in the development of new supply chain processes and systems. Sukanya Roy heads the national level initiatives for global capability centers and business process management at NASSCOM. Her focus is to be able to make India the strongest capabilities center for these industries globally. She brings in more than 16 years of experience in consulting and strategy. Her key focus has been working with CXOs of global multinationals to help them design and execute their global strategy. And Alpana Chagankar heads operations of the business process management practice at Nextime. She leads a team of accounting professionals and attorneys who provide clients with finance, accounting, and contract management services. She specializes in assessing and understanding client needs, implementing them, hand-holding the project through hypercare to steady state, and guiding continuous improvement efforts. Thank you all for joining us today. Let's get the panel started now. So I want to start with a question directed to Deepak. Deepak, you manage the global shared services operations for J&J, a Fortune 500 healthcare organization. How do you decide on the processes or functions to be outsourced to service providers versus what is to be retained within the organization?
Yeah, first, just Jeeth, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. I think you've started with a really great question, and if I'm honest about it, when shared service centers initially begin, I think it's largely a very organic type of decision. Heavily influenced by particular line leaders, heavily influenced perhaps by the goal of labor arbitrage, right? Looking for some quick savings. But over time, we found it's really important to have a framework to think about these decisions more holistically, and to make them in a consistent way as you look at the opportunity for each particular process or sub-process area. And the way we do that is to think about the characteristics of that particular process. And we'll actually go through a list of criteria in terms of what our stakeholders are looking for. Those could include things like agility. How important is it to be able to flex the process up and down? Capability. Are there particular skill sets that are needed that are specific to us as a company, or that are widely available in the marketplace? How important is cost certainty, right? Do we need to be able to predict exactly where we're going to be? And do we need to lock in certain financial metrics? How quickly do we need to get something up and running, right? What is our ability to leverage talent out there? What is our future plans for that talent? What is the role of context in this process, right? Is heavy business engagement required or not? So we actually run through a list of criteria. I gave you some examples, and then you can actually plot the opportunity for outsourcing versus insourcing based on where those criteria lean. And we've actually done that proactively now for all of our shared services processes, so we know what the ideal state is, and then that serves as a discussion guide. Because the data tells us one thing, and then we will have the right conversations with our leadership to make that final decision.
Thank you. Thanks for getting us started there, Deepak. On to Misha. As a domain expert, how do you derive value from the processes managed by the GCC?
Okay, well, I'm coming from a supply chain area, and that's where basically my professional background is, and also where I'm working with all the business partners. So from this one, when we introduce GCC, in this case, basically we are looking into, first of all, to get full understanding and alignment with what we as a customer want from GCC, and they fully understand what we are trying to achieve short term, medium term, and also long term. So first of all, it's kind of building this full alignment, and also getting commitment that long term we have a clear alignment of our interests and what we're trying to achieve. And at the same time, it's always about the quality of the device, because we as a company, sometimes we work for the big companies, we have a big pool of knowledge. In the smaller companies, pool of knowledge, especially in specific world areas, would be small. In this case, quality advice from GCC is very useful for us to implement what we're trying to do from business perspective, and at the same time, how to do it in operational level. Because they can share with us much more knowledge compared to what we have sometimes maybe within the company, which I used to work for. Second, I think the value comes really from the point that GCC can do the job more than I can do it myself. Because it's really important when our business partner fully understand how we're executing the things, and they're actually able to do it better than what we probably can do it ourselves. This is the real value. And this is where they add the value compared to what maybe we can do the same activity by our own hands. And lastly, I think that clearly GCC has a big advantage because of the speed and the flexibility of deployment. They have much bigger capability of doing this. Within the company, we have limitations. We have a limited number of people. Sometimes there is a certain timelines which we need to do. At the same time, when we involve GCC into our activity and our project, obviously, that's what I found out, that actually they can do it much quicker than what I would be able to do it myself with my organization internally. So this is actually, I think, main values which I believe specifically in supply chain, when we have a combination of operational activities and at the same time building the future, GCC will really help to maximize business and build a bigger future.
You know, I want to jump in here. First of all, Sukanya, I'm going to come to you with a question, but I want to thank Deepak and Misha for kicking us off with this, because I especially appreciate and you both did it, the holistic approach to deploying a GCC strategy. So with that in mind, Sukanya, I'm coming to you with a question. I know it's a matter of pride that India hosts half of all global GCCs. When an organization is seeking to establish a GCC, what are the most commonly supported functional areas? Maybe why do you think it's so, just to add on to that answer?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mark. Before I do your question, I want to add one point to what Deepak mentioned, right? I've been in conversation with many organizations in my past roles as well as now in terms of what's their insourcing or outsourcing strategy. And I feel in today's world, the way people look at it is, what is your core? What is it that will create your business differential going forward? And if that is something that will be a differentiation for your business, you mostly want to retain it within, be it your offshore or create a global capability centers or offsite, and you take the support of your service providers to build that out maybe. And if it's something that's going to be run and operate and something that will not be the most clear differentiator, you'll probably outsource. And that's what I've seen. I'll give you an example. For an auto organization, IT was never core. But today, with software ruling automobiles, with them becoming a service provider to insurance companies for data, IT and digital has become core, and you see that they're making a difference. So I just wanted to give an example of this core versus context, with a lot of organizations are re-looking at what is core and what is context. Anyways, coming back to your question, Mark, I think, honestly, there are 2-3 things. I don't think there is one function which is better than the other. What I believe is there are 2 things. The organization's readiness to be able to, pick it up and transition it. And I think that is something which is often underestimated in terms of their preparedness and their willingness to be able to experiment with that. If you take India, for example, the skills are not a challenge. We are just too many people, right? And we're also, as a country, we've invested in education. It's not just the tech skills, but if you take up the number, we have 1.4 million people in business process engineer, business process management, be it in finance, HR, knowledge services, research. So I don't think one function is easier than the other. However, from what I've seen is a lot of organizations go with what is slightly more matured on the scale, which very often is finance, HR, and IT. It's just probably more of a comfort zone for companies to start with, but then they go all the way. There's supply chain, there is research, there's obviously customer support, which is India's probably the biggest space for. So I don't think there's one better than the other. It's just probably more people within the organization who may have experience with some of the functions, given the fact that they've been done for 20, 25 years now.
No, I appreciate that. And having that experience gives them a little bit more security, I think, being willing to relinquish some of the control that maybe they fear otherwise doing. Alpana, you've been so patient. Let's bring you into the conversation. Sukanya just talked about some preparedness issues and challenges, and that's where I want to focus this question, because there are many advantages of multifunctional GCCs, and certainly they're well documented. But there are challenges, and those challenges are unavoidable. So as a service provider, how has Nextime helped its clients overcome these challenges?
Thanks, Mark. And I would start by saying, the most important thing for a GCC is to remain relevant all the time. And for that, we need to be fully aligned with the vision of the client and their changing business needs. So a few things that help us overcome challenges, I would say, is a robust governance framework with clients, because that gives us a platform to understand their priorities and their changing needs, plus an opportunity to review performance objectively, talk openly about issues, and put forward ideas. Second is to build processes and teams which are agile and future ready. We focus on deeper knowledge of the processes and specifically handoffs and touch points that impact user experience. We have processes that are obviously well defined and backed by detailed documentation. And also we use visualization tools to have a real-time visibility on performance. Another challenge, specifically this part of the world, is attrition, and hence talent retention and knowledge retention both are extremely important. We need to have strong people processes, maybe performance management, maybe engagement, career progression, succession planning, so on and so forth. So I believe it's an ongoing investment for us in training and upskilling of people, and at the same time, continual improvement of processes through transformation and technology.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, Alpana. Question for Misha. You have been responsible for many transformational projects in the supply chain. So we'd want to ask you, according to you, is transformation in supply chain? What is transformation in supply chain, and how does a GCC play a role in supporting that journey?
Okay, so there are maybe two major points here. First of all, about just a couple of words about what transformation is. I think it's basically it's getting into the state of ability, constant ability to address the new challenges, to support the business, to help them build the business. So this is actually, supply chain should be fully flexible and maybe sometimes even one step forward compared to what business needs from you or what situation is required from you, but be able to execute and to be able to work in a new condition. And this is, I think, what transformation mood and transformation way of thinking helping supply chain basically to execute all these new tasks and challenges. Secondly, this is there is, I think, famous term about business continuity planning. So this is like common business continuity planning about how to search for new improvement opportunities. There is not always like everything is perfect, but we always try to search for new ways how to do things better, more cost effective, quicker, and more easy for our customers. So I think transformation overall, it's kind of getting supply chain in very flexible mode and able to execute all our tasks. So this is about transformation as a concept. And GCC role, I think it's really key for us because it really helps us to actually to be in such a position when we can transform ourselves, because GCC is really helping us with the resource, with industry knowledge, and also bringing new ideas. I remember when we started the project with GCC to transform supply chain in our company, that's basically, we had one idea how to execute certain things, but GCC managed to give us some definitely different approach. And after discussion, we had this is going to work this way. And your ideas are also very good. So I think GCC role is really proactive and positive in the way how we build the strategy and how we can execute supply chain operations, and then also medium-term and long-term perspective. Also, I think much faster deployment. That's what GCC is able to do for us. This is clearly the role which was very valuable. And availability of needed resource. Sometimes we ask them, okay, do we have a knowledge in this area? Because we don't have it. And then they came back to us and say, no, within a week, yes, we give you the answer how to do certain things. So this is really, I think, a very good and positive role from GCC to help us to perform transformation of supply chain and perform our project, which we wanted to execute. I think overall it's a really key business partner, and not really short-term business partner, but long-term business partner with a very expanded scope, not really maybe a simplistic kind of back office operations, but GCC is becoming really multifunctional, because 5-10 years ago, we could think maybe in supply chain, okay, we'll give them really simple activities to do, like copying invoices or arranging the payments. Now, GCC is really capable to execute much more complex activities like planning, forecasting, managing operational logistics activity. So this is just examples. I think GCC is playing a key role, and especially for medium companies and small companies, it could be really a differentiator of the value what GCC will be able to deliver in the business growth.
Wonderful. Thank you, Misha. And great point about the growing role of supply chain and the need for them to continue to be flexible, agile, and handle the disruptions that are happening in today's world. I'd like to turn to Deepak briefly. In your experience with your vendor partners, how have they assisted in achieving the transformation objectives of the J&J BPO?
Yeah, Jasheet, I'll start by saying that helping us with transformation now is a basic expectation we have. It's almost table stakes for us, for any BPO partner. We talked about this idea of core and non-core earlier, as a great point Sukanya made. But whenever we send a process out, presumably this is less core for us, and it should be a core capability for our partners. They do this work across many other clients. For them to be competitive in the marketplace, they need to be constantly transforming their own process and being as efficient and effective as possible. So we absolutely depend on them to bring that best-in-class experience to us when we do outsource something. As far as how to do it, I think it's it comes down to maybe three things. First of all, shared incentives, right? So we as J&J Global Services have a commitment that we make to the business about getting better each and every year. It's not just about taking on work from other parts of the company and doing it cheaper. It's about transforming that work, automating that work, adding value, continuously improving. So we make those commitments, and we have targets year over year that we need to get better. And we ask our partners to share in those targets, right? So our contractual commitments, include, year over year improvement, whether that's in pricing, whether that's in productivity, and other forms of SLAs. So shared focus and incentive is really important. And then I think it's really, secondly, about dedicating the right amount of time and resourcing, whether it's a specific team or resources, but ensuring we have the right amount of capacity and focus on transformation, separate and apart from our day-to-day service delivery, right? Because the ongoing demands of actually running a process are high, and you don't want to compromise that or your performance, and you might need slightly different competencies to drive process transformation compared to high quality service. And finally, I think it's very much about partnership. So for us as a team that oversees partners, it's really about really close contact, communication, making sure both sides understand the goals, that both sides understand business priorities, technology priorities. So we, for example, have a technology roadmap within our company on where we plan to go a few years down the road. Our partners really need to understand that so they can prioritize their efforts accordingly and in complete alignment with what we're doing. So that way we move together towards that goal.
Thank you, Deepak. The theme of strategy is coming through loud and clear from all of you, and that's important. And I want to turn to Alpana because certainly it sounds like, relating to what Deepak just said, a provider better be very good and have as its core business those activities that the client organization wants to offshore, and send out as their non-core. So with that said, what might a GCC prepare for as it strives to support these strategic initiatives of its clients' organizations' non-core activities?
Book mentioned, the starting point is to understand and expected outcomes. And it takes multiple discussions and constant dialogue to be fully aligned and also define the time frame within which we want to see those results. So there are three broad areas where I believe GCCs contribute, bringing industry knowledge and expertise, project management, and change management. So obviously we need to be forward thinking and quick in adapting and managing change. So from preparedness perspective, we need to be fully aware of developments in the technology landscape, newer trends, and look for relevant solutions, because not every client needs what is available in the market. So we also need to identify and deploy right resources for different roles, who are flexible and creative, but at the same time open to new ideas. The team that we put to these strategic initiatives need to be fully aware of the impact of these initiatives, and also need to have great people skills, because they need to collaborate and drive change. So these are a few thoughts I have on how we prepare for strategic initiatives.
Yeah, people skills never go away, right? They're always there. Before I go to Sukanya, I just want to remind the audience where I'm starting to see some questions roll in, which is great. So if you do have questions, now would be a good time just to remind you to enter them through the control panel, and we'll try and adjust those shortly. So Sukanya, back to you here, if you don't mind. What are the benefits of a multifunctional GCC as compared to a single function GCC? And also, does a multifunctional GCC suit specific industries better than others? I know you didn't think so much on the functions, but maybe industries.
Yeah, so I'll tell you how, typically any organization, how does it grow, right? It grows through acquisitions, or it grows through, I mean, when I say grow, it grows across locations. Most of it beyond the first few offices happens through acquisition, which means that you pick up businesses, you pick up entities which are in that part of the world, and then they come with their set of locations. When you set up a GCC in India, it's really an opportunity, and probably one of the few opportunities that you have is to actually think about a location strategy and what are you going to do in that office, which is very different from when you acquire and things come with you, and then you go about rationalizing and and making it seamless. So when you are setting up from scratch, it's a very, very good opportunity to understand how you're going to structure your teams, how you're going to structure your functions, what are you going to bring in, what are you going to know. And what lands up happening as a fallout is very often the GCC in India lands up being the only entity, possibly globally, which has presence of all parts of the organization. So let's say if you have a tech team, which is, a product team or a tech team, which is distributed from, across 10 locations in the US, everybody sets up a team in India. Let's say you have services on various parts of the country or even other, everybody sets up a team in India. And so in some ways, this organization becomes the microcosm for the entire enterprise, and hence really brings in 3-4 very, very strong advantage. One, this is where you pilot your experiments, because you really are able to figure out that if I'm going to bring in a process change, is it going to work for all my functions? That's an immense opportunity that a lot of time you don't have in rest of your sites, because they come in silos. Second, how do you innovate? How do you do a cross-functional innovation? I'll give you an example. You have your tech team building an application. You have your operations team, which is actually using that application to provide a service. Let's take an example of a bank, right? So your tech team is developing the platforms. Your business operations team is, helping your customers trade on it or invest through it. So you actually have your users of your technology sitting next to your technology team, which means all the conversations that we have about customer understanding, customer behavior, all of that challenges can actually be solved internally with them sitting next to each other. All you need to do is create probably innovation pods of them working together once in a while, get them to visit each other, just let them go out for dinner or lunches at times, and you see how problems can solve out. There's another very, very third and interesting interesting opportunity that very often we don't think about is we can actually have multi-skilled people who will move from function to function over a period of time. They will understand the enterprise properly, and they will bring their experiences together to bring that organization very, very close. So I believe that multifunction centers are an absolutely fabulous way for an organization to really think about their future organization model, because it gives you really a good opportunity to bring different facets of the organization together. To your second question, Mark, I think it works for everybody. I don't see a single industry where it doesn't work. I think it works the best when there is a combination of tech and services kind of going together, because I feel like the advantages have an exponential multiplier effect. But I don't see any good reason why it may work better for one industry over the other, because I do believe you have your consumers and users next to each other. Same with HR, right? If you have your HR shared services, you have your majority of your employees sitting there, so you understand what your tech people want, what your ops wants, what your everything wants. So that'll be
I suspected you were going to answer that way on the industries, because you're a great storyteller, and to hear you speak about the automobile example and then the banking example, certainly tech and services you mentioned. So no surprise that you felt it could cross industries. We've got a couple of audience questions I think it makes sense to bring in now. And this is what I'd like to invite the panel. I'll address this to Deepak, at least the first one, but feel free, any of you, if you'd like to chime in and have a conversation and add on to Deepak's answers, that'd be terrific. So the first question has to do with practical stuff, Deepak, and that is the transformations are complex, and implicit in that is that, it creates anxiety amongst the teams. There's no question about that. So the question is, how did you deal with change management associated with these transformations?
Sure, Mark. So I'll speak from the perspective of outsourcing, but I think these points will be broadly true as well. I think first of all, you want to think broadly about the impact, right? So they can bring anxiety amongst staff working within a process. They can impact business partners, senior leadership, external partners. So I think you may plan for one constituency, but if you don't think broadly about everyone who is being impacted, I think that there could be potential derailers hidden unless you think about it that way. Secondly, I think change is heavily about communication, right? And at Johnson & Johnson, we're fortunate to have a very structured change management team that can help support us with the process, with the communications. If you don't have that, I think it's very much worth investing in some type of dedicated resource that brings those skills to the table and that can help with the structured approach that's required and the clear communications that are required. And then finally, there's a number of change management type of frameworks out there that you can look at. They might be 7 or 8 or 9 step type of methodologies, but I'm going to call out a couple of things that I think for me have been really critical. And, I think they involve kind of getting early wins, right? So you need to have examples of success. You need to have advocacy within the organization to help spread that change successfully. So I think Sukanya also mentioned this. I think starting with pilots, starting with small scale implementations of whatever that change is, whether it's a business process, whether it's a new technology, a new way of doing something. I would say start small, prove success, build a coalition, right? Find people that will support that for you elsewhere in the organization.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Deepak. If anybody has anything to add, feel free to jump in now on change management. Otherwise, maybe I have another question. Okay. So Sukanya, this I'm going to direct to you because it was directed to you. As an industry body, NASSCOM has to be aware of the challenges of operating a GCC in India. Now, the challenge part, I think Alpana talked to a little bit from the provider side. What would you say are some of those challenges, maybe from your perspective?
You mean from the enterprise who's running the center?
Well, you know what? I'm not going to interpret what the audience member meant. So let's go to from both.
Sure.
Sides.
So I think
I don't want to put you on the spot, but wherever you think.
No, I think there are 2, 3. I'll talk about, from the enterprise, which is running their operations. And when I would talk about in general, what are going to be things that could be a challenge. So from an enterprise point of view, I think what's very, very important is cultural integration, right? Because if you do want to have your own center, which is essentially an extension, is an extension of your teams, you need to ensure that you are able to build the same culture, mindset, vision. And this is a significant change management because, you are far away. You're not sitting next door. But thanks to COVID, I think we've all understood that remote isn't really a challenge. I would say it's a challenge, but it's not something that is prohibitive in terms of you building growing your enterprise. So I think the cultural alignment, creating the vision, which means that, yes, your leaders will have to come here and spend time. Your people from India will have to go there and spend time. You have to meet customers both ways. You will have to change a mindset a little bit to what the Indian talent landscape is. The India talent landscape is extremely young. We're a country, our average age is 27, which means your workforce is going to be in that range, which is very, very different from most of the traditional enterprises which are setting up. So this is a, not just young, but also restless. That's another thing, right? So I think this cultural alignment is always tricky, but we've done it for 1,500 organizations. We can do it for many more. So I think it's just the process of getting that right. The second thing that I believe often becomes a little bit of a challenge is an organization's ability to let go, which means that what do you put in here? So if you just start always with this low-end work, something that's, that's not something you want to do and hence you're putting it there, that approach can get you in a cycle, which means that you will start getting, India is a competitive market. We have talent, but we also have companies. So it can get into a cycle, which means that you will not get the right kind of people. And then because you don't have the right kind of people, you will not be able to go up the value chain. And that kind of cycle, that's a pitfall we should avoid. We should go with business needs and what is right for the GCC rather than what is it that I don't want to do and hence I'm shoving it out, right? And just the third thing that I want to say from an India point of view, I think it's just getting your talent and leadership right, which is a little bit of it, which continues to be a challenge for any organization in any other parts of the world as well. In India, I think it's a competitive market. I will not deny it. Talent is premium as much as it is in anywhere in the world. So please get your talent and your leadership strategy right. It's important to have senior leaders. It's important to invest in them.
Thank you. Any additions from any of the other panel members on these challenges?
If I can add an observation, and it may not necessarily even be a challenge, but maybe a little bit of an opportunity. Having worked with a number of different BPO partners and worked in many markets, I think one of the things that's notable in general, but I would say especially in India, is this cultural piece among the staff who work for our partners to really want to connect with the mission and the business of their client, right? So that was a little bit of a surprise to me, I think, if I'm honest, when I first started learning about the space. They want to see themselves not only working for their direct employer, but they really want to be attached to the goals, objectives, and feel part of that. So I think that's if you don't address that, I think that's a little bit of a missed opportunity, or maybe a little bit of a challenge. But I think there's much to be gained by really engaging the staff, making sure they're informed about your business, trying to outreach to them and make them feel involved, make them feel excited about the work that they're doing.
Thank you, Deepak. There's a couple more questions here from the audience. Jasjita, would you like to field these?
Yeah, actually, I think this one came in. I think this is probably for Misha. Misha, we were discussing earlier about the supply chain and how it's been obviously majorly disrupted this year, and we're still facing a global issue here. From your perspective, did having a GCC help during the challenges caused by the pandemic?
Oh, yeah, I think it was problems last year, this year, and probably the good news, the problems will continue into the next year. So it's that's where we are. And I think it's clearly, for the company I work for, it's basically we were in situation, and just a bit of history here. We have all supply chain coming out of the US, and I'm supporting business operations in Asia Pacific, which is, so we were majorly affected by all the challenges in ocean freight, shortages of air freight, which came together with the COVID. And in this situation, obviously, GCC and NextDime stepped in and really helped us actually to close this gap and to manage logistics activities between US manufacturers and then our customers across Asia Pacific region. So this was really good, and they managed to do it quickly. They brought a good talent, and basically it's really helped to close the gap in communication with the freight forwarders, which were also struggling, but we were struggling even more because our customers were asking us where our product, and we could not even give them the answer. So GCC was really helping us to close this gap. But on the top of this, we also did a major project, which was actually a transformation project, when we realized that the way how we manage business even before the corona, we could not continue this way because the business is growing and we cannot just manage the supply chain setup, which we have now. So actually we engaged into the project last year, which would transform the whole supply chain of organization, the way how we arrange the shipments, the way how we move the products, the way how we store the products in the region. And NextDime was absolutely excellent at this because it was in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of the lockdown in India. This was actually the most challenging time for guys in India, and they helped to organize themselves with all the time differences between US, Asia Pacific, Europe, India. So managed for us to execute the project, and actually we built the model, and we have a very clear strategy what we want to do in the future. So hopefully in a few months, pandemic will go down, and in this case, project will be implemented. So I think it's clearly example when GCC really helped us in operational and supply chain, day by day work, and also in building the future for the organization. So it's really kudos to NextDime team for this. Thank you.
Excellent. Actually, that leads to the next question quite perfectly, because Alpana, you've been instrumental in mapping the success of transformational initiatives for your clients. How has Nextime supported to achieve such objectives and goals set by your clients? We just heard a wonderful example here from Misha. Would love to hear more about that. I think you may be on mute. Oh.
Or maybe we have an audible issue with Alpana.
Audible?
You're
Oh, there
audible
you
now. Thank you.
Very good. Go ahead, Alpana. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jasjeet, and thank you, Misha, for the vote of confidence. We are a solutions company, and there is no one fits all kind of a solution. So we always need to come up with something which is relevant and suitable for the client's size, scale, and budget. So to start with, setting up a GCC itself is a strategic initiative, and our role starts from maybe educating the client on what's possible, defining scope, to hand-holding them in every step of their journey. Another opportunity is being part of their growth journey. We have supported clients in stabilizing their M&A initiatives. We have helped them in achieving efficiency goals through centralization, standardization. A quick example for one of our clients, which is into business aviation. We started the journey with them more than 10 years ago when it was just a small operation in UK. Over these years, they set up Greenfield in Middle East, they acquired a couple of companies in the US, and we have been the backbone of all those decisions or implementing those integrations to the degree that we were involved in interviewing and hiring the finance controllers in those regions. So these are some of the success stories we are very proud of. There are many such stories where we have implementation partners for their digitization journey. So with years of experience, I think we bring structure, discipline, we take ownership, we believe in transparency, and hence I think clients trust our judgment and our insights.
Fantastic. Well, great to hear the fruits of your labor are showing, as you can hear from some of the examples today. As we're coming to the end of our discussion, it's been extremely engaging. I'd like to give our panelists just a minute or two to give their final remarks. Why don't we first start with Deepak and then go to Sukanya. Deepak?
Yeah, thank you, Jasjeet. I've enjoyed hearing the different perspectives today. The title of this seminar is really about catalyzing and taking advantage of multifunctional GCCs. So hopefully I've left you with the important role that our external partners can play in that, both in terms of getting to that state as fast as possible, but more importantly, bringing the capability, right? We're beyond that labor arbitrage stage of evolution in BPO partnerships and GCCs, and at the point where they really need to be adding value. And the capability and expertise that's brought forward by external partners is really the reason why we need to do it. And whether it's supporting our transformation activities or constantly pushing us to really just be best in class, that's where we really find that value. So thanks.
Thanks. Sukanya?
I think, globalization is absolutely the way to go. I think diversity of thought, diversity of talent, bringing in people with very different thought processes is the only way I think any organization today can remain competitive and remain relevant. The question is, how do you structure that model for yourself, right? How much of it you choose to do internally? What do you do externally? And so it's not whether, which is a question anymore, but how and at what pace. is really the answer that you need to find for yourself. Different companies will find different combinations that work. All I just want to leave everyone with the thought is that no matter what you think you want to, set up in India or in any offshore center, it is probably done and it is probably well understood. And there are probably people, individuals and organizations who know to do it well. All you need to do is find the right channels for finding those enterprises and those partners and those leaders who have done it. There is very strong network. The information is going to be available. So don't limit your thinking, expand your network, and use that to tap onto people who will help you connect with the right set of best practices.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Sukanya. Let's go to Misha. Final remarks.
Yeah, thank you. I think knowing that most of the audience is in the US and Canada, actually, I would like maybe really to address this point because I'm in Asia Pacific, and I think especially for medium, small companies, I think this could be daunting task and actually lack of resources because obviously they're focusing on their customers and just on selling activities, but all the other functions, including supply chain, how to do it and so far away, it's difficult to imagine and how to do. And I would say GCC is really a good model how to bring your products, how to bring your services to the regions which are so far away from you. So in Asia Pacific, please do use GCC. I think it's a good model, it's working. In India, there is a good pool of resources and companies who can do it. And I think last point is also maybe it will really allow stability of your business operations, and it will allow you to transform both business and supply chain in a much faster and better way when you are using GCC approach. So that's probably my remarks. And then I think, yeah, that's what I want to say. That's a good model, which I think, and I wish maybe GCC would be around 10 or 20 years ago, which was not at the time. And now we have it. And I think it's much easier for medium-sized American companies to go to Asia and to build a business there. So go ahead, guys.
Perfect, perfect. Last but not least, Alpana?
I think there were a lot of interesting thoughts shared in today's discussion. So I want to kind of put forward a couple of those which are already discussed. One is, I think the client organization for the enterprises setting up GCC should look at GCC as a valuable partner in their success story and not just a back office or, a low impact business process management company. Second is, there is an investment that GCCs need to make in technology, in being culturally aligned with your client organization. And also the companies who are setting up GCC, they need to make an investment in making the GCC successful. I think it's an association and an investment from both the sides. For specifically GCCs in India, I would say they need to invest in creating their brand to attract right talent, because as Sukanya also mentioned, it's a competitive market and you need to be attracting the right skilled talent to deliver consistent value.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you all really for sharing your valuable insights with us. Today's discussion has been highly engaging, and I'm sure that your versatile experience provides the audience with a well-rounded perspective needed while evaluating their GCC journey.
And thank you, Jasjit. This does conclude our Q&A session, but don't leave just yet. We look forward to having you join us for our last webinar in the series. As I mentioned, it will be on December 8th, and it's going to include discussions on the role of technology in virtual migration, transition, and governance of GCCs. So I'd like to take this moment to extend a very heartfelt thank you to everybody, to our listeners from across the world, really, to our panelists, Deepak, Misha, Sukanya, and Alpana for their insightful contributions and for hitting it right on the button in terms of time. We're right there at the 60-minute mark. To the US IBC, ICICI Bank Canada, and CBRE for their generous contributions to help support this event, and to the entire team at Nextime, who's been working very hard behind the scenes to make this a success. We invite all of you to connect with us and to discuss how Nextime can work hand in hand with you and your organization. If you have any questions in line with today's discussion that we were unable to address due to our time constraints, we do welcome you to reach out to us at thinknext@nextime.com, and our team will be very happy to respond offline. So across the globe, we do think next at Nextime, and we invite you to do the same. We welcome your feedback on today's presentation. Be vigilant, stay safe. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye.
for taking this conversation with us.
Thank you all. Wonderful.